Greetings to you wherever you're joining us from. It's January 21st, 2024, and this is Nation Watch, a production of the People's National Congress Reform. I'm your host, Mervyn Williams. I want to take time out to thank everyone who contributed to a very successful rally last evening at Burnham Court. People braved the weather to be with us and stayed to the very end. Thank you very much for the sacrifices you made to get there. We know how things could be rough at this time of any year, more particularly 2024, when we have got to fetch a budget of 1.1 trillion Guyana dollars that contains nothing for you, but everything for the People's Progressive Party's friends, families, and favorites. With me today to discuss matters related to Budget 2024 is Mr. Rawle Lucas, an economist who served very recently as chair of the Guyana Revenue Authority and the Guyana Power and Light, which now gives us a lot of trouble, but not when he was there. Mr. Lucas, welcome to Nation Watch once again.
Thank you very much, Mervyn.
Mr. Lucas, on the 17th of January, a few days ago, the Kaieteur News editorial had this to say about Budget 2024. This 1.146 trillion budget is an insult to the conscience of the Guyanese, not as much as the hundreds of thousands of them who are left to fend for themselves any way they can. Your comment, sir.
Well, based upon, first of all, let me say thank you very much for having me. And let me say thanks to your viewers for tuning in to hear the comments that I might have on this matter. I wouldn't challenge what that editorial said based upon the information that I have and a review of the 2024 budget that I have done. So I wouldn't challenge that at all. One of the things that has been happening in this country is that we have been, since oil, we've been talking about the fastest growing economy. And when we do that, we're really talking about the speed with which, the GDP of the country has been changing. And I guess the Kaieteur editorial is really addressing the extent to which those rapid changes are making their way towards the citizens of this country.
This is the categorization of the national budget by many, that there is a lot there. And as an earlier conversation we had, during that conversation, you made the point that it has people in mind. Because, now this is my bit, people are essential to whatever it is they have as an ultimate aim, as an ultimate goal. And that goal is furthered by the fact that this budget is almost double last year's budget. And the thrust is on public infrastructure, which we know to be the vehicle for corruption, which we know is the concentration of wealth in the hands of few, while many can only hope that eventually something will come their way, but the reality is different. How do you, sir, relate this fastest growing economy, this richest economy in this region, this 10th richest economy in the world, to the working class population that continues to cry out under the burden of high cost of living with no relief in sight and no promise of any relief in Budget 2024?
Well, I think for me to be able to answer your question for the benefit of those who might be listening and viewing, I think it would be useful to back up a little bit and talk about what being the fastest growing economy means in the context of Guyana. And we need to recognize that the changes that are occurring in our economy are being produced or could be produced by a couple of things. One, existing industries growing their output rapidly. Two, it could occur when the production structure of the country changes. And three, it could occur when both are happening. And in our case, the event of significance that occurred was the addition of oil and gas to the production structure of this country. And oil and gas, as you know, are central to the operation of all economies in the world. And as countries grow their economies, the demand for oil also grows. And when the demand goes up, so does the price of oil. And that is something that Guyana has been benefiting from. But that change, however, is not without consequences. Some outcomes tend to be favorable, and others tend to present challenges. And three things come to mind in that regard. Firstly, we can talk about the contribution, the changing contribution of each industry to our GDP as a consequence of the oil and gas being added to our production structure. We can talk about what clearly has begun to emerge as the concentration of income among certain industries in the country, and the indications that it gives for growing income inequality in the country. And thirdly, we can talk about the change in the pattern of trade and the implications that has for the foreign earnings that we generate in this economy. Now, I can tell you, in 2023, oil and gas industry, which is the big game changer in this country, accounted for 70% of the income that was generated by this country. 70%, just think about that. It means that all other 28 industries that we have in this country have to share 30% of the wealth that we have.
That averages out to quite low
Precisely.
numbers.
It's quite low. And the other thing that has happened is industries, as a result of the presence of oil and gas, have begun to change in terms of the impact that they have had on the economy, compared to the past. And let me give you an example, or a couple of examples. In fact, I can tell you only 3 industries have been able to maintain the position they had in 2023. In 2029, they could have only done that in 2023. And the only 3 industries that were able to do it were health services, health and social services, or social protection, as we call it. Other manufacturing, that is the other industry that was able to, and financial services. Those are the only 3 industries that have not changed in terms of their position with respect to this economy as a consequence of everybody else has gone up or down.
And those were already low.
And many of them were already low. So I think this is something we need to recognize. The other thing that I want to talk about here is the concentration of income. In 2019, it took about 20 of the 28 industries in our country to generate 90% of the GDP of this country. In 2023, it only required 8 because of oil. And so we've had, in addition to the oil and gas industry, we have our other crops industry, we have the construction industry, we have the distributive trade industry, we have admin services, real estate, gold, and financial services. Those 8 industries account for 90% of the income in this country. It means clearly that other industries are not, in the context of the amount of money that we have in this country, it means that there are other industries which are not contributing as much, relatively speaking, in this country. It means, therefore, for example, if I had $10 out of, let us say, $100 in 2019 as a contribution to the GDP of this country, now that the GDP has gone to, let us say, $1,000, I might have only been contributing 12. So even though I might have grown, the disparity is greater. And this is something that we have to keep in mind with this budget, because I don't think the budget has taken that kind of behavior of the economy into account. And it's something that we should worry about. Then the third thing that I want to point to is the pattern of trade. 2 industries are now responsible for generating 94% of the foreign earnings of this country. 2 industries, gold and oil and gas, 94%. It means that every other industry is contributing just 6%. So you can imagine the implications of that when you look at how our foreign reserves are managed and used. Because most of that is coming through the oil and gas pipeline, it means that that money, which is controlled by the government, goes into the central bank. Whatever it is, because it has to be used to meet government spending. I think there are some special arrangements in the gold industry as well, with respect to, how the producers of gold are able to manage foreign currency as well. So you can see why, as a consequence of the change, the pattern of our trade, that, there could be challenges with respect to foreign currency. And these may very well be contributing to the challenges that the private sector and even ordinary citizens have been experiencing so far.
Comment on the fact that sugar, which is a focal point of the administration, has been for a very long time, reducing its contribution to below 1%, and rice averaging out at 1% of this whole pie. Recognizing, of course, that these 2 industries carry this country's economy together with a few others in the not so distant past. And what does that mean for us in terms of food availability and affordability?
Well, the numbers speak for themselves. What you're seeing, again, even though there might be positive movements in some instances, like in the case of rice, and not so positive movements as in the case of sugar, what you're seeing is a growing gap in the wealth being generated by the sugar industry and the rice industry, And also, um, you know, there's a significant impact on those who are operating or working in the industry. So it's quite clear from the numbers that they are not um, likely to be making any significant contribution to our GDP in the near future, at least.
God forbid a collapse in oil price, for example. What happens to our economy, which evidently now almost exclusively relies on oil and gas?
Well, I mean, it is true that some other aspects of the economy are growing, but if the oil industry collapses, because so many of them are now dependent on the oil industry, then it means that whatever progress or success we might have had during the course of the buoyancy of the oil industry could collapse. So we are at a risk when it comes to how we behave with respect to the resources that we are receiving from the oil and gas industry. And I know that there are many people who are concerned about the spending that is occurring, of the monies that we are receiving from the oil and gas
Relate that to the
industry.
boast of the budget being financed by 40% borrowing, the implications for the future.
Well, I mean, when you look at the fact that we could very well run into a cash flow problem, but it's all a question of timing, because you can um, you can have enough money to cover you for the period in which you might be experiencing a downturn in oil prices. So it's all a question of timing. But if, as you said, God forbid, and it happened at a bad time, then we will experience the same challenges that countries that have been reckless in the management of their resources, we'll have the same problems.
Moving along, budget 2024 is almost double budget 2023. And in fact, it is as large as maybe 4 or 5 budgets of not so long ago. This whole question of money in the economy, where does it go? How is it absorbed? And do we have, as a small yet fast growing economy with a population of an average of 750,000 people, and only so much production capacity, and the numbers look dismal in that regard? Where is all this money from budget 2023, and where does the government hope the money from budget 2024 will go? And how will that impact on inflation if, assuming that Jagdeo is right, and paying public servants increased wages and salaries will fuel inflation? Where will this money go, and what will its impact be on inflation?
Well, I don't buy into the argument that paying public servants a bit more will fuel inflation in this country. But I agree with you that one has to be concerned with the ability of this economy to absorb such a large planned expenditure by the government. When we had budgets in the low 100 and 200 billion, we couldn't spend the money. We even had problems spending the money we had last year. So I would agree with anyone who wonders where we will find the capacity, where we really and truly intend to spend the money that we have decided to add to this year's budget. It appears to me as if the emphasis continues to be on cement, sand, and stone. And all of these things have to be imported into this country because we are not producing enough. I can tell you, I looked at some numbers based upon remarks that were made by the leadership of this country, that we are not even producing half the amount of aggregates, let's call it that, that are needed in this country for all these projects that are taking place. And even though we are importing some of them, we are nowhere close to the level of demand that this government has created but cannot fill as a consequence of the inadequacy of supply of inputs into these various projects. Add to that the technical skills that are required to ensure that these projects could be implemented efficiently and with minimal waste. I mean, the minister himself in his budget presentation spoke about all the resources that they plan to import into this country in order to enable them to carry out some of the work. So the point I'm trying to make here is I don't think there's any clarity, even in their minds, as to exactly how they intend to spend that money. There might be some unseen, undeclared motives, but I don't know how they will do it. I don't know. Some people think they know, but I don't know.
Well, one presenter at last night's rally, young Elson Lowe, he suggested that a government will only craft a budget such as this one when they are confident that they're not going to return to the seat of government. What are your thoughts on that, if any?
Well, the only thing I can refer to is a statement that has been on social media that was made by the president about leaving office in 2025. So I have to assume that he understands what,
I remember that statement. I believe it was in the town of Linden that statement was made. And well received, may I add. Ladies and gentlemen, you tune to Nation Watch. My guest is Mr. Rawle Lucas, economist, among several other areas of professional trading, Mr. Lucas. And I'm your host, Mervyn Williams, and we're discussing this budget that is empty when it comes to the working class of this country and our senior citizens, but really full of goodies for the friends, families, and favorites of the People's Progressive Party, who this conversation is bringing out may not be certain of how they intend to spend the money. I want to shift to the whole question of governance. There is the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board that supervises the award of contracts. There is the Public Procurement Commission, which has its constitutional functions. And then there's the oversight body, the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly. The National Procurement and Tender Administration Board, NPTAB, seems to have arrogated to itself some strange powers. They have all this money to manage in terms of award of contracts. But here is the Public Procurement Commission saying, look, we need some information on the award of a particular contract. And this NPTAB refuses to give to a constitutional body the information it requested, the next backup oversight check is the Public Accounts Committee, which will come into action years after the expenditure has been made. And only then can they have answers. But how important are those answers to us? And what purpose do they really serve? Mr. Lucas, how do you relate the functioning of these three entities in the context of this budget, which is heavy, really, really heavy on public infrastructure? And may I add, which is evidently a leak through which much of the budgetary allocations fall.
Well, I think what you're really referring to is the management of our public finances.
Yes.
How do we manage the public finances? And we did create a couple of institutions to help with that management. And one of those was, with respect to procurement, was the Public Procurement Commission. Now, we have to remember that the act that created the procurement process has as its objective and the rationale for the creation of this act, the promotion of competition among suppliers.
Yes.
And I think the case that you're referring to suggests that there might not have been fair competition among the suppliers. And so it is also supposed to promote fairness and transparency in the procurement process. And so this issue that you raise about the MPTAB refusing to respect the oversight authority of the Public Procurement Commission is a very serious one. It's clear as day that this government has no interest in ensuring that this economy is managed fairly and properly, and that as a people, we can collectively improve the services, the goods that we give to people, and as a consequence, the lives of the people that we're supposed to serve. The Public Procurement Commission itself has been identified to assure that procurement itself is being fair. It is competitive, it is equitable, it is transparent, and it is cost effective.
And carries an appeals component.
As well. So if the Public Procurement Commission can't get the information to help this country achieve its objectives, then what's the point in having it? What's the point in talking about opportunities for everyone when clearly the case that came before the Public Procurement Commission raised the question about access and opportunities for everyone? So its ability to investigate cases of irregularity and mismanagement and to provide remedial action, because that's the thing it is supposed to help with. It's supposed to be an impartial body, independent of everything else that is taking place, and therefore, creating conditions which really and truly reduce the confidence of people in the whole way, the process and way in which the finances of this country are being managed. The Public Procurement Commission can't do its work if it can't get the information to help us to improve. And for this government to say that its goal is to make the life of Guyanese better rings hollow in those circumstances. It becomes worse, in my view, notwithstanding the fact that the Public Accounts Committee, comes a little later in the process. But imagine the Public Accounts Committee is an institution of what is supposed to be an independent branch of government in this country. And that independent branch of government cannot function because I'm told that the Public Accounts Committee had to cancel about 25 meetings since the law governing participation was changed. 25 meetings it had to cancel.
And the government has no problem, no difficulty with that. Gail Teixeira has defended the cancellation of those meetings when it is clear that the intention of the Public Accounts Committee has always been to be up to date with its work.
Yeah. Well, from what I can see is, when we as citizens condone these obvious violations of policy and rules, we are actually agreeing to the construction of a corrupt society. That's what so we are not absolved from blame at all by our own failure to hold the government accountable. Something that we may have forgotten in this country is that the government is our servant. We employ them. It's not they employing us. We employ them. They are required, just like every other institutional unit in this country, to obey the laws of this country. But they're not. And the reason they are doing that is because we are allowing them to. And that is something, we have to look at, because what is the point of having a National Assembly that makes laws if the laws are not applied as necessary? What's the point? We might as well scrap it. What's the point in having it if these laws will mean nothing? And if the government, which is the executive branch, will not respect the very laws that it helps to create. Makes no sense in the country, as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know. I don't know.
But it appears to the onlooker that here's the first attempt at testing the waters by doing something that smacks of the deliberate need to avoid accountability, to see what the reaction will be like, and to determine whether or not the advancement of this behavior, this conduct of avoiding accountability could be sustained over a period of time. It appears as though it is deliberate, because this question of accountability for the resources of the state is critical for many reasons and for many purposes, including the furtherance of the development of our country. So if MPTAB can get away with accountability breaches, and someone in the government could say, if you wanted the information, all you had to do was pick up the phone and call the president.
Why is he to be involved?
It smacks of contempt, not just for the citizens of this country, but for the instruments that have been put in place through legislation and constitutional provisions to protect the resources of the state.
Well, it seems to me as if nobody is serious about it. Certainly not the government from the way they behave. But again, what I'm going to say is that it is the citizens who have the responsibility to hold the government accountable. Now, I will agree that we seem to be divided on this responsibility of ours, because you would find many in the private sector who ought to hold the government accountable for some of its conduct, but actually either stay silent or encourage it. We are not, and we, the citizens, are doing the same.
I want to shift your attention to something that troubles many in our society. This notion that we are rich in resources but poor in reality.
You want to tell that to the public servant? Because that's a reality for the public servant.
Of course it is.
And, you know, I want to share some information with you. You know, I think
Before you hit that bit of information, Mr. Lucas, if this country is so rich, why is it that overseas remittances, by account of Ashley Singh himself, why is overseas remittances still as high as the numbers reflected in budget 2024, in excess of $1 billion? The numbers show that remittances in 2022 stood at 7% of GDP. Remittances in 2022 doubled the national wage bill. But we are rich. Yet we must rely as ordinary working class citizens of this country on our relatives and friends abroad and NGOs abroad to support us. There's this cry from Mr. what's his name? Ali, about the creation of wealth in Guyana. Is real wealth being created for the ordinary citizens of this country when they have to be supported in this manner, to this extent, by relatives living abroad? Why not pay public servants a living wage, and so that relatives and friends abroad can enjoy what they earn while the Guyanese enjoy what they earn?
well, you know, quite recently, I heard the president saying that his government inherited a mess from the coalition government. I was surprised to hear him say that because the evidence that he referred to does not show that.
A mess in military terms means something else. So he must have, in fact, encountered a mess of food.
It might have been, you know. So I want to start with the public servants.
Sure.
You know, there's some things that I want to talk about with respect to the remarks that were made by the president. But I want to start with this whole question of the public servants and link it to this whole issue of remittances. I have with me a table that shows the circumstances of public servants from 2015 to 2023 and what their situation will be in 2024 as a result of the budget that was read last week. In 2015, without oil, public servants were able to get 5% of the income or wealth we had in the country at the time. The country, the wealth. See, some people focus on the budget. You need to focus on the source of the money for the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that where the source is, you could either take less or you could take more. They were given 5% in 2015. They were given 5% in 2016. They were given 6% in 2017. They were given 6% in 2018. They were given that amount again in 2019 and in 2020, 6%. In 2021, when we all know things were flowing into the Natural Resource Fund, they got 5% of the wealth that began
Of a larger pie.
Of a larger pie, they got 5%. In 2022, they got 3%. In 2023, they got 3%. And in 2024, they will get 2%. Now, I know some people are going to say, but you're getting much more money because if you're getting 2% of $1 million, is far greater than 2% of 100,000 or 5% of $100,000. That might be true. But here's the reality. When you take the taxes and the inflation figures, this is the reality that the coalition left the public servants with, as against what is happening to them today. In 2015, a public servant had the ability to enjoy at least 4.2% of our wealth, of the income of the country.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, they enjoyed 4.26%. In 2017, 4.38%. In 2018, 4.65%. And in 2019, 4.92%. In 2020, 5%. In 2021, and this is what matters, these figures I'm giving you are the figures that reflect what you can actually buy in the shop. You could only buy $3.72 worth of goods in the shop today, as against what you could have done in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
This is after you adjust for inflation.
Inflation and taxes.
Mm.
In 2022, you could only spend $2.26. That's why people are feeling the way they're feeling. It's real. In 2023, it became $2.60. And in 2024, this year, it will be $1.88 out of every $100 that you get. That's what you'll be able to spend and buy goods with, take home to your family. That's what this budget is telling you.
In the meantime, hundreds of billions of dollars will be there within an economy that is perhaps incapable of fully absorbing it.
That's one thing. But what I want you to look at is what this means. If you take the public servant as one group of people and everybody and the rest of us in the economy, it means that they're now getting $1.88 out of every 100, while the rest of us are going to get $98.12. So you can see the disparity in income that is arising.
The three-card budget.
You're right to call it a three-card budget. And anybody can go to the Bank of Guyana and generate this information. They'll see for themselves. This is not information that I made up. This is coming from either the Bank of Guyana report or the information in the budget. The other thing that I want to add to this conversation is the transfers. And I'm talking about those that represent direct benefits to Guyanese.
Mm-hmm.
In 2023, the government gave Guyanese, every category, all categories, they gave them 1.78% of our wealth. So you add that to the 1.88 that they're getting, that they will get this year. You're talking about 3.65% of our wealth going to public servants and all of us who depend on transfers. And in 2024, it's 1.44% or $1.44 out of every $100. Imagine the building blocks of our humanity, our children, when it comes to transfers. We're going to get this year 38 cents. 1.38%. 38 cents out of every $100. We are committed to ensuring that our children can be supported. The indigenous child can't even get 10 cents. It's not even getting 5 cents. And these numbers that I'm giving you include the teaching supplies that are given to teachers, the textbooks, the school feeding programs, and all the daycare support that have been mentioned in the budget and quantified. Getting. So when you add what the public servant will get to what the direct benefits will be, you're looking at about $3.26 out of every $100 to be spent by this government.
The contempt of this government for the working class in this country is something that only the working class in this country can deal with, can address, can fix. And this is one of the primary reasons for the parliamentary opposition insisting on a clean voters list with biometrics, so that when the elections shall have come, we have a credible list to work with. And the People's Progressive Party, because of the contempt for the people of this country, will be rejected without any opportunity to cheat to remain in government.
Well, I mean, you're making a very critical point. And if I were to, come back to the observation I made just now, the remittances that you referred to represent 5% of what the 2023 budget was. So it's telling you that our people in this country are better off with their family leaving and going and work overseas than being in this country, trying to build it on behalf of the citizens.
And the government proudly says that it'll have to import labor, including nurses, following the shutting down of a nursing school. And now they're investing more of our revenues, more of our resources to build yet another nursing school. This is a three-card trick budget. And the government is attempting to blind our eyes with the $1 trillion, $1.1 trillion budget flashing in your eyes like diamonds, so that when they shuffle those cards, the citizens of this country, the majority of the citizens of this country, can only turn up either the card that says abject poverty, rely on overseas remittances, or punish, or starvation wages, which amount to the same thing. But when the People's Progressive Party and their friends, families, and favorites go to play this three-card game, they turn up the one that says $1 trillion. So that the minority controls the majority of the money, while the majority of the population must, as you pointed out, live on 5%, 5 cents from every national dollar. The solution is clear. As the leader of the opposition said last evening at the rally, the solution is clear. For Guyana to grow, the People's Progressive Party must go. And budget 2024 is heavy on numbers, heavy on infrastructure, and heavy on suffering of the working population in this country. Could they have done better for the people of this country? Yes. Why haven't they, in your view, Mr. Lucas?
Well, I think it might have something to do with their false interpretation of the circumstances in this country. Because, again, if I were to go back to those comments that we recently heard from Mr. Ali regarding the mess that he said his government inherited from the coalition, you will see that, they're perhaps working on some wrong assumptions. And I will tell anyone, because, one of the things that he said, that the output for bauxite and sugar and forestry were, in free fall. I think that's what I heard him say. Now, my advice to anybody who wants to know the truth, they should go to table 11-1 in the annual report of the Bank of Guyana, and they will see the trend for themselves. And what they will see is that the performance under the current administration is not better than the performance under the previous administration when it comes to those commodities that he referred to. But you will notice he also sidestepped some other industries which perhaps would not, shed good light on the performance of his own government. But that's okay, I understand that. But then he also spoke about export earnings from the very three industries. And again, anyone can go to table 8.2b in the annual report to the Bank of Ghana or in the statistical bulletin, and they will see the quarterly bulletin, and they will see that under the coalition from 2018 to 2020, average export revenues for sugar, 26.2 million. Under the PPP, the numbers are there. Average is 19 million US dollars. Timber, the average foreign earnings on the timber under the coalition was 31.6 million. Under the PPP is 24.9. Shrimp, the average earning was 75 million. Under the PPP is 52 million. Bauxite, the average earning was 110 million. Under the PPP, it's 86.2.
There's no surprise there.
These numbers are in the tables. So I really don't understand what motivated him, to come out and make the remarks that he made. It's, I don't know. Rice, it's 217 the average income we got for foreign earnings we got. Under the coalition, 202 under the PPP. Gold, you got 874 million average per year. And under the PPP, it's 832 million. So I really don't understand why he did it.
We have about 3 minutes more remaining on this program, Mr. Lucas. There's decline. There is hardship. There is high cost of living. Do you, sir, see direct transfers to the citizens of this country in these circumstances as being a relief measure that could positively impact the lives of Guyanese? And if you do, would you say that there's a fiscal space available for such transfers, and whether we should pursue it at this particular juncture, given the high cost of living and the wealth available to us? We have 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, my simple answer would be it is something that is worth considering. That's my simple answer. It is something that is worth considering. Every other country around the world has been, making various forms of transfers to their people that reflect the ability.
Organized and structured.
Organized and structured that has enabled people to lift themselves out of poverty, not this Hiram Scarum approach that we seem to have right now. And again, all of this, falls back to the improper management of the public finances of this country. There seems to be a willingness and acceptance under this administration that, improper public financial management is an acceptable form of good governance. I don't know how come, but that is what they are peddling to people. And, there are a couple of points that I wanted to make, but I understand we're out of time, because I wanted to warn people about this notion that they're running around the place telling people that if you buy a house today, tomorrow the value goes up or doubles, you would be able to now become a direct investor in this country and so forth. The only advice I would give people is look before you leap.
Well, it is evident from the direct foreign remittances that the homes that are being constructed are being financed from another country. So I don't know that the wealth is in fact being generated from the local economy.
Or it might not be reaching
And
those who need it.
and the reality is that if a citizen receives assistance from abroad to construct a house, you can't use that as collateral because the whole question of the ability to repay a loan at the bank arises. So I think Mr. Ali is living in a parallel universe. I think that but we will see more. We will see more tomorrow. The debate starts, and already the opposition members of parliament have signaled their intention to challenge the provisions of the budget. Um, the rally last evening was a start. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Lucas, for appearing on Nation Watch and for, wow, laying it out the way it is in Budget 2024. Not much promise of hope for the ordinary working class Guyanese citizen. Bad news, but well presented. Thank you very much, Mr. Lucas. And to our viewing public, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us, as you always do on Sundays. And we will be following the budget 2024 as the debate starts tomorrow. And we will be bringing you periodic updates and having conversations with our presenters as the debate proceeds. Thank you very much for joining us. Until we meet again next Sunday, by God's grace, be safe, be blessed. I'm your host, Mervyn Williams.